Okay, cool. So we're back with another Q&A, and I just hit record. So now we're live. This will be posted in the answers, in the submit answers underneath the submit questions inside the Discord. So for anyone who had questions but they weren't able to attend, you'll be able to watch this back. I've got Ian, In Flight Music, my co host. He's going to be in here today helping us out, answering questions with me. I'm David, another monster. So, welcome. And we're going to go through all the old questions, and then anyone who's in this who has questions can also jump in and ask questions. It looks like Luke is going to have a question he's typing, but we'll get to that in a little bit. We're going to start from the beginning. So, DMBX asked, oh, and by the way, just so you guys know, In Flight Music, he has his own YouTube channel. He does a lot of like plugin reviews and stuff. So you can search In Flight Music on YouTube and he'll pop up. So yeah. So first question is how to make my sound good and fat. And then Poisonous is quoting Carnage. Yeah, yeah. I don't.
Oh
I
gosh.
don't know if you remember that, Ian, back when Carnage
Yeah,
was.
the greatest inside joke in
Yeah,
FL Studio history.
yeah, pretty much. I don't know what this
Are you
knob
familiar
does.
with that joke, Fat Hedonist? The Carnage quote
No,
from
I am
Razor?
not.
So
So Carnage was on in a promo for Razor with FL Studio, and it's funny because they have like this slow motion cinematic footage and it looks so professionally done. And then they start letting Carnage talk. And he's talking about like using the volume knob, and he's saying like it just makes it much better.
he just says I don't know what this knob does, and he's turning the volume knob, and he's just like it just makes everything sound so much bigger and fatter and better, or something like that. I forget the exact quote, but it
The
was
exact
it was
quote is so
hilarious.
much funnier than what we're saying,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's
You got to check out
hilarious.
for anybody watching. Go check out that if you haven't seen it. It's like it's comedy gold. Um, but yeah, no. So saturation is a good thing to experiment with to fatten up your sound. Saturation and distortion. Saturation is kind of like a subtle form of distortion, and what you're doing is you're adding harmonics onto the sound. So by doing that, it's actually physically fattening up whatever the harmonic content of your original signal or your sound, whatever you're using. Um, I guess some other things you can do. That's like the number one. I guess I don't know, Ian. What would you say?
Yeah, definitely number one. But even before that, mess around with your ADSR. Make sure that you're getting your full sustain on the sound itself if that's what you're needing. So shape the sound itself before you even get into adding whatever effects. And that goes with um, compression too. If you're wanting to shape the sound in terms of sound design, I don't use a lot of compression in mixing, but um, because I just make beats. But for sound design, I'll use compression to fatten up the sound a little bit before I even get into the other things, the other effects.
Yeah, for sure.
Parallel effects in terms of saturation. So that's another way of getting that saturated sound, but still maintain the original sound as well. So depending on what you're trying to do in terms of the tone, that'll be a dramatic difference with the tone. And then using stereo widening effects, so messing around with your left and right, mid, side, that can make a sound more fat or seemingly bigger. Chorusing effects, that'll do it as well. Think about throwing a sound from left to right. So maybe just not having the sound right up the middle at all times. So effects like Panamatic, that can make a sound seemingly more fat. Doing that with delays, reverbs, making those go left or right. Or maybe you have the original sound on the left side and then just the reverb and delay on the right side. Stuff like that, where you mess around with the stereo imaging, can really help in terms of making a sound bigger. But when you're talking about just fatter, usually people are talking about saturation, tape saturation, tube saturation, distortion, overdrive, stuff like that. But those are some examples.
Yeah, yeah. adding the width is a really good suggestion. So delays can definitely do that. If you experiment with your delay in a way, you can get it sounding pretty wide. Also, the Fruity Stereo Shaper, I really like that plugin a lot for making things sound really wide. The only issue with that plugin is you are messing with your phase quite a bit. So you just want to be aware of span. If you have the span, the Spectrum Analyzer plugin, you can check the correlation meter on there, which will let you know, whether or not you're in phase or out of phase. And really, I mean, I wouldn't worry too much about the phasing issue. If it sounds really out of, like, you'll be able to hear it if it sounds really bad and out of phase. So one thing that I'll do, and we've talked about this in the past, I think, but I'll layer sounds. So I'll have one sound that's kind of mono or down the middle of the mix, and then I'll have another sound layered on top of it, and then I'll use the stereo shaper to make it sound really wide and spread out. And so that, like, the combination of layering those two sounds with the stereo shaper, and then you could even add delay, some of the other stuff we're talking about, that'll really fatten up and like completely take up the whole stereo image of the track. So
Yeah, huge emphasis on the layering. That's actually how I first got started with sound design more than adding effects and whatnot. I would find two good sounds and try and mash them together as much as possible. And that would give me fat sounds no matter what, without even going to effects. But
yeah,
layering's huge for sure.
And actually, I just realized, so Fat Hedonist answered this by saying Sound Goodizer, or any saturation. So yeah, Sound Goodizer is, you can definitely use that. It is definitely a good way to fatten up. It's kind of got a very specific sound. So let's go ahead and move on to, I'm not going to go, okay, so yeah, Inga's actually did a really long answer to that too, but we'll move on. That is fat. Look at this waveform.
Oh, I didn't even realize that was a waveform until you said it. I thought it was just something someone crossed out or blurred out or something.
No, dude, that's like a waveform. That's hilarious.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, man.
That's funny. Does go into pretty good detail, kind of going along with the whole Sound Goodizer thing. He's saying everything that I would have said about Sound Goodizer, basically.
Cool.
So
yeah, so that's good advice there. Yeah, let's move on. See if I can find another question here. Okay, so Vampire Ghost Baby asks, what do you think about saturation before or after reverb? Well, these guys, they're doing a good job of answering all these questions. So Ingas is saying that most of the time he puts it before, but it can, it really depends. I mean, that's really the answer to any time you have a question about which effect to add, like before or after. It really depends on the situation, and it's gonna be something that you maybe want to experiment with and see what you like better. So, Ian, what would you say about that?
There's an awesome feature inside of FL Studio where all you have to do is just hover over the effect in your effect slot and use your scroll wheel to move that effect around. I use it every single mix that I mix down with my beats. Yeah. So yeah, move those effects around because it does make a huge difference for sure.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. So how do I replicate this hi-hat technique in FL Studio? Okay, well, I guess I'll take a listen to this and we'll see what it sounds like.
And what we can do is a slight vocoder to really make it ever organic. And I'm thinking maybe creating a room reverb to the return.
Hang on, this is a really, really long video. I'm assuming that he's talking about this specific spot.
At that 14-minute
yeah mark? So I'm not, without like a little bit more context, it's going to be hard to know exactly what your question is, because what I heard with that particular hi-hat was, I mean, it sounded like he's saying he was using a vocoder, but the effect kind of sounded like it was a filtering effect. which you could replicate, with any filter. I use the what's the name of that plugin? Is it Destructor? The one that has like the newer plugin that has the 4 different
Yeah, Destruct.
yeah, so I use Destructor for filtering a lot. You could also just use an EQ, like the Fruity Parametric EQ 2 or any EQ. I think that's what you're asking about. Were you able to hear and see that at all, Ian, on that video?
Yeah, I would have to watch more of the video to even really understand what he's talking about with the hi-hat.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing, it sounded like there's a little bit of swing on it, maybe. So that could be the other technique he's asking about. And there is a swing feature on the channel rack in FL Studio, but you can also just manually move stuff off the grid, which is usually what I do. He's also asking, a lot of Ableton producers use glue compression. What is the equivalent in FL Studio? I don't know that there is an equivalent to the glue compressor. I don't really know exactly what the glue compressor does. Do you, Ian?
It's just an SSL emulation, but even the glue compressor inside of Ableton, I've heard that it does still sound different from the glue compressor, which is made by Cytomics. But if you use even the RComp, which you could get for like $20 or 30, yeah, like $20 from Waves, that will definitely add glue better than any of the stock or the paid compressors inside of FL Studio for sure. And then there's a free compressor called the Kotelnikov. I think I'm pronouncing that right, from Tokyo Dawn Records, TDR.
Okay.
They're the guys that make the Nova plugin, which I've covered on
Nice.
my channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's like a auto dynamic reverb, dynamic EQ. But their Kotelnikov, it's a mastering compressor, and it does that gluing effect that you're looking for. And basically, all glue compression is doing, it's just bringing it's doing compression, but it's just doing it in a more musical way where the transients just sound nice and the lower level sounds are being brought up in such a way where it just kind of goes along with the groove and the rhythm with your attack and release settings. But it's, for whatever reason, it's just harder to do with your stock FL Studio compressors, even the stock Ableton compressors, really stock any compressors besides maybe a DAW like Studio One. That's like one of the rare DAWs that actually has stock plugins that are hardware emulations. I don't know any other DAWs. Maybe Harrison Mixbus. That's actually a DAW that you could get for under $100, and that has compressors and EQs that are modeled after hardware. Even the DAW itself, each of the channels, those are, yeah, they're completely designed after SSL consoles. So
That's sweet. Yeah, I didn't realize that Studio One, their plugins were hardware emulated.
they started doing that in version 4. So I think before that, they just had regular digital compressors. They still have those compressors as well, but they introduced a whole bunch of hardware plugins that you get with Studio 4 and beyond. I think they're on version 5 now.
Nice. Yeah, well, I need to look into Studio One. I've heard a lot of good things about it. Okay, well, let's move on. So, just to recap, I want to look into that free plugin you were talking about. So, what was that called? The
Kotelnikov, I believe. Kotelnikov, I think.
Okay.
Off
Cool.
the top of my head.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna look into that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a good compressor for sure.
Cool. All right. Well, hopefully that answers your question, Enigmax. So Fat Hedonist had a question. Did you ever get this answered, Fat Hedonist?
Yeah, it was all me, man. It was all VSL. It was VLC settings. It's all fixed.
Oh, okay. So it turned out that it wasn't even FL Studio. It was something else. Okay, cool. So that's this dialogue here. Oh, yeah, okay, here. So Moonbeam has a question for me about the synthwave tutorial. He's asking if I did any further mixing or refining to the track. So no, I basically just made that specific track for that tutorial, and once the tutorial was done, I didn't do anything else to it. I never like released it or anything. So yeah, what you hear in the tutorial is basically the finished product. Also, where can you get some reference tracks where you can see every element in the track, like FL Project? Okay, so there are a lot of places where you can get FLP files and like go through them. Some people charge for them. Some people just give them away for free. And Ian, what are your thoughts on FLP files? Because I personally, like when I was learning, I never used them to like try and learn from. What do you think about them?
Yeah, me personally, anytime that I even tried using FLPs, including the ones that come with FL Studio, it just confused me more because there's just no instruction with them really. If you can find an FLP where someone's, if they have like an actual tutorial with it, that can definitely help for sure. But I'm not sure. If you go to like Udemy or something, they'll tell you if they're giving you FLPs with their course. So if you could find a course, yeah, I think I said tutorials. I meant a course. If you actually get a course that has FLPs with it, that makes sense. But if you're just getting FLPs just to get FLPs, I don't know how that's really going to help you because you're just going to see all this routing, and really that's what confused me, just seeing routing and not understanding what goes where and what's doing what.
Yeah, unless you're already really familiar with FL Studio and you already know how various people might set up their project, it is going to be very confusing. So yeah, the answer to that is if you want to dish out a little bit of money and maybe buy some courses, some of those courses will have FLP files with them where they'll actually explain what's going on, or they'll have a video where they can walk you through it. I did one tutorial on my channel. It was like a lo-fi tutorial where I gave away the FLP file. I don't remember the name of the tutorial off the top of my head, but maybe somebody else does. They can type it in, or I'll look and try and type it in the answers like after we're done with this session. So not strictly synthwave, but it might still be helpful. And okay, so yeah, Poisonous Music answered anyway to search for that, but yeah, you may run into the issue of not really having a good FLP. That's very clear.
Especially for the EDM genre. Synthwave probably isn't too bad, but hopefully some of those, I think one thing that you will get from the FLPs are your effects chains. So, and again, depending on the genre, they might be routing that stuff with sends. I just finished a project today where I have parallel tracks, and that's a part of my effects chain. So yeah, depending on the genre, that might confuse you, but there might be some gems in there where you might just find, a nice chain of effects for sound design, especially if you're doing synthwave. There might be some nice effects chains in there for you. So that's one thing that you could take away from that, if anything. So
yeah, yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Let's move on. So AZN Thug says, I'm trying to master my track. I use Ulean to check the loudness. Every time my kick hits, I get a red dot. See the big green circle attached. Okay. I also get the red LRC small green circle for the true peak max. Are the red dots and the LR something you need to avoid? If I lower the volume of the kick to prevent the red dots and LR, my track ends up with low volume and integrated LUFS of -18 or -19. I'd like to have my LUFS at approximately -14. Any feedback is appreciated. Okay, so I'll address the true peak first. So true peak has to do with what is it, like inner sample something.
Yeah, inner sample peaking.
Yeah, inner sample peaking. So what's actually happening is when you can basically be peak. You can have your track limited and be peaking at, let's say you set it to just the ceiling, which is 0 decibels, but then things can technically peak above that, and I think that has to do with inner sample peaking. When you compress a file from like a WAV file, you compress it to an MP3 file. It can actually you need a little bit more headroom in there because it can go above. Now, I'm still not like 100% clear. Maybe Ian, you can answer this a little bit better. But I've seen tracks that are the true peak is like 3-4 dB, like above 0, like EDM tracks and stuff. So I don't know. I mean, I've heard from like real mastering engineers that you want your true peak to be, below 0. But then I've used a lot of referencing and I've seen it way above. So I don't know how much that matters. Now the red dot.
How are you getting the reference tracks? Where are you getting your reference tracks from?
Just downloading them, and they're usually they're MP3s when they're peaking above like that high.
Okay, yeah, the MP3s can introduce extra level that might not actually be there. So if you actually got the WAV file might not peak above, which is pretty interesting. I know that doesn't make sense, but
well, that's what I was talking about with the inner sample, or is that was what it is? Inner sample peaking.
Right, but a whole 3 dB there might be something else going on there too. But overall, I know that he's concerned about the red dots and the red LR there. It looks like he set his true peak to -1. And when people do that, that's for streaming purposes. That's what you want to do for Spotify, Tidal, and Apple Music, and so on and so forth. So I'm assuming that's why you have your true peak set at -1. So every time you see those red dots, it's actually just telling you that you just hit -1. So that's probably where your kick is hitting every single time. And that's not an issue. If you set it to -1, then it's just letting you know that you just hit -1, or there's some limiting going on that brought it down to -1. For example, if you're using Isotope's Ozone, they have a true peak option inside of the maximizer. So if you click that on, 9 times out of 10, even the true peak option inside of Ozone isn't as accurate. I definitely trust Lean loudness meter compared to any of the other meters out there. So if I set that to -1 inside of Ozone, 9 times out of 10, it'll actually be peaking by 0.1. So I'll set that to -1.1, and then that'll give me that -1, and then that's when I'll see that. I'll have those red marks up there too every time my kick drum's hitting, but for sure you're just hitting -1, so you don't have to worry about those little red marks up there. In terms of the referencing with MP3s, I reference with MP3s as well, but I get my MP3s from BeatStars. So again, I mix beats. I'm not mixing songs, and EDM's definitely going to be different. I'm just now getting into EDM, so I'm like really curious about the how the MP3s look for the EDM tracks that you're referencing.
Well, I mean,
because
first of all,
maybe I
the
need to go a
the
little louder.
LUFS. So like for EDM specifically, I mean, you'll have like integrated LUFS at like -4, -5 LUFS. So like they're
Jesus.
super loud. Like I mean, they're so loud that it's like, I mean, it's ridiculous. So,
Right.
and I mean it varies on genre to genre. So like future bass usually will be a little bit quieter. Dubstep will be like just outrageously loud. So I've just sort of been like not too worried about whether or not the true peak is actually, below 0. Because even when I'm referencing, like, so if I'm adding a limiter, or if I'm using like Maximus or something like that, so sometimes I'll set my like peak to about -1, like what you were talking about, just to like have that
Mhm.
extra dB of headroom. But even doing that, I mean, if I'm using a ULEAD loudness meter, like with everything else that's going on, I'll still see that it'll be peaking at, the true peak will be like above 0. So I don't know. I'm not really 100% clear on why that is and what's going on with that. Because
So what are you hitting with your integrated for your tracks?
well, in those cases, I'm trying to push it pretty loud. So probably like -8, -7, maybe even -6.
Mhm.
I don't know. It depends.
Yeah, recently I've noticed a lot of the BeatStars tracks. Like every once in a while, I'll download the top 10, top 20, and just go through the loudness of all of them. And I just recently did that right after I got back from vacation.
Hmm.
And a lot of these it's gotten a whole nother LUFS degree louder than the last time that I did it.
Oh, really?
So they've gotten louder again, and they're hitting right around -9. A lot of them were hitting -8, but I would say the average now is definitely probably -10 on the low side and -9 on the high side. The last time I did it, it was negative in between -11 and -10.
And that's
So
integrated.
now I'm going to start. Go ahead.
That was integrated.
Yeah, integrated. So now I'm going to start going a little bit louder than what I was doing, because I was going -12. And after a while, I definitely did notice that my tracks were lower than the average person on at least the top of the charts on BeatStars. So I'm about to start going -10 at the lowest and -9.
Yeah, we're kind of getting off
on
on
the
a little
higher
bit of a
end.
tangent here, but one thing that I will say is, I've been in some sessions where, like, I wasn't necessarily always worried about loudness and about LUFS and stuff, but I've been to some sessions where I was trying to like show my beats to some people, and I didn't even have them mastered or anything. Like I had like the pre-mastered tracks that I was showing them, with like 3 dB of headroom, and there were, I mean, I don't even know what LUFS they were at, but it was probably really really quiet because they were
Mhm.
pre-mastered, and like people did not like, they did not want to hear that. They wanted to hear like heavy bass, like loud tracks.
For
So
a split second, I thought you're gonna say the opposite. I was like, finally,
nope. No,
one
no,
time where I hear the
no,
total opposite story. Yeah,
nah.
that's the story that I always hear.
Yeah,
Like you hear track after track after track, and then they get to yours or someone's that where it's turned way down or not mastered, basically. And it's
yeah,
like, no, what the hell is this?
yeah.
We
No, they don't
even
want
listen to
that.
the
They want
music.
it to be loud, and they want the bass to be slapping, and they want like a a mock master.
Commercial ready.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah. So
It is what it is, and that's kind of what again, you're right. We are kind of going off on a tangent here, but yeah, just to wrap it up, yeah, I'm going louder, only because I feel like I can maintain the quality that I was getting. Because if I can't push it louder and it starts getting distorted, then of course I'm going to back it off. But if I'm still getting a clean signal, I'm going to push it louder, and that's what I've been getting. So I'm going to keep going.
Yeah, that's kind of been my overall sort of, I guess, motto when it comes to loudness. Like as long as it sounds good, you
Right.
might as well push it as loud as you want.
Exactly. That's how I feel now, for sure.
So let's move on. So Steve 100 asks, does anyone know how to morph a vocal into a synth sound? I'm listening to a track where there's really nice melodic female vocal, then the sound kind of slowly morphs so that it becomes a synth, then back to the vocal again. But there's like an in-between sound where it's a mixture of the vocal and the synth. Would you use Vocodex for this kind of effect? So I'd like to hear an example of what
Probably.
you think it is Vocodex.
You could definitely do something like that with Vocodex, no problem. Vocodex, there's another vocoder inside of FL. You could also use Harmor. That'll definitely do it. Outside of the box, there's Vocal Synth 2, which just dropped from Isotope. That'll do it. Another way to do it without a plugin at all, just crossfade and throw in your fades and literally have your vocal go out and the synth go in. Another way to do it would be with basic phasers and flangers. That could give you that synthy type, those type of effects, modulated effects. That's really what makes a vocal sound like a synth. So any type of modulation with phasers, flangers, chorusing effects, that will make that vocal sound like a synth in 2 seconds flat. And then modulate that with, or automate that with a fade in and out from the pure vocal into its full effect and back out again.
Sweet.
It looks like he does have an example.
Yeah,
here.
he does. Let me
let's
go
go-
ahead and take a listen to this real quick. So he's saying the
Yeah,
vocal
same
comes
here.
in about 3 minutes. So let's take a listen real quick.
Yeah, I'd say in that case he has this Isaac Carter guy. He actually does have an actual synth going on. It's not the vocal that's turning into that synth that comes in. That's actually a synth that is playing, and he's crossfading into that synth. With the vocal, it sounds like he put a phaser on it, not necessarily a Vocodex or a vocoder. It just sounds like a phaser, and
And then
that
to me, he sounds like he's
fades
also
out into the synth.
yeah. And what I'm hearing too is that he's doing a lot of filtering with that vocal too,
Mm-hmm.
which is
Yeah.
getting it. That's what you're getting when it sounds like a vocal sample, like the dun 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 dun, and then it like filters out.
Mm-hmm.
There's definitely some filtering going on in there too. So
Yeah,
probably
that's actually probably the main source of the that's probably what actually is taking out the vocal.
Yep.
It's not a volume ride, it's probably a filter
Yep.
altogether.
that's what I'm
doing
hearing.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then he probably, I mean, he could be layering it with a synth or something. But answer is there's tons of ways to mess around. I mean, there's so many
Mhm.
different ways to experiment and like come up with cool effects. Filtering is huge. That's a big one. Let's move on. So Luke, I think this is from today actually. Looks like we lost him, but we'll answer his question. I have a lot of problems with vocal timing. So I mean, the vocal is offbeat. Do you have any tips or tricks that, for example, this one, a lot of people told me the vocal effect is offbeat and not right with the timing. So let's take a listen to this real quick and then we'll give them some feedback.
Know you need somebody tonight. So come on, move your body close to mine. Know you need somebody, nobody.
Yeah, so I hear what they're talking about. It also sounds like the vocal might be out of key with whatever, like the track that you're making. So there's a couple things here. Number one, I'm guessing that you're probably taking a vocal like an acapella, and you want to make sure that the acapella is at the same tempo as the track that you're producing. There are a couple ways to do this. Number one would just be to like actually line up. Excuse me. Would be to actually line up the vocal and make sure that the tempo syncs with the vocal. What's the easiest way to do that, Ian?
There's a feature inside of the playlist inside of FL Studio. I'm assuming he uses FL Studio.
Yeah.
And you can right click the audio and bring up the match to tempo option, and it'll match that to whatever tempo FL Studio is in. And then if you have no idea what tempo the original audio is in, so say you're matching up like two pieces of audio, actually that what I just said doesn't make sense. There's an option in there that asks you if you do know the tempo range. So if you're working in like halftime, meaning you're using double the speed of what people are normally using, I would click that section rather than say 60 to 120 BPM. I would choose the 120 to 180 BPM range, and then that will match it up a lot easier. And then also make sure that you have, I believe it's called, actually, let me take a look right here. The stretch audio option inside of FL Studio. I'm not seeing even where it's at right. Oh, right here. Yeah, at the top left of the FL Studio playlist, there will be a option to stretch the audio instead of cutting the audio. So if you match it to your project tempo and you see that it's not a full perfect 4 bars or 8 bars, take it and stretch it to that full 4 or 8 bars, and then it will still be in the same pitch. But I think David's right. We're hearing that the vocal itself is out of key as well. So you're going to have some issues there in terms of pitching. But I still recommend following all those steps and then going into the audio sampler inside of FL Studio, wherever you have your clip in, and click on that, and then actually change the pitch in the time stretch settings. And make sure that your mode, switch that from resample or auto or whatever it's on, switch that to real-time stretch. Throwing it on stretch inside the playlist should do that automatically for you, but I feel like I've ran into some cases where it didn't do that. So make sure that it's on stretch inside of the actual sampler as well. Besides that,
So the other option that I was going to
noticed-
mention real quick is that you can actually, if it's a vocal where it's kind of you're wanting to chop it up, and actually kind of go in a more unique direction, you could actually chop up each element and then like manually line it up with the grid. That's going to be a lot more time consuming and may not be advisable. But I have done stuff like that in the past, just as more of like an effect. Like if I don't have like an actual vocal that is like singing a full verse, it's more of just like a line here and a line there. And I want to sort of stretch it and like fit it to the beat. Sometimes I'll do that where I chop it up and then just mess with the stretching that way. So a couple options to work with there. Sorry to cut you off, Ian. What was your last thing you were going to say?
Well, actually, going back to what you said, there's been a time where I've been forced to do that because the vocal was performed with someone just playing piano, and the piano wasn't like to a metronome or to drums or anything. So basically, I had a raw a cappella that was in and out of time throughout the entire performance. So I had to go in and chop up the different sections, sometimes by word, sometimes by phrase. But yeah, if you come across a situation like that, that whole time stretch thing that I told you about, that's going to be key to make sure that everything does sound correct.
And how accurate would you say that the fit to tempo is within FL Studio when you click that?
I'd say 9 times out of 10, it gits it right.
Okay.
9 times out of 10.
So just be aware that it's not always going to be perfect. It's usually going to be right, but if make sure that you're using your eyes, and you can set a metronome whenever you set the tempo, and just make sure that the metronome is like playing in time with the acapella, that it's matched, and then you can go into the grid and you can you can use your eyes to see the grid on the playlist and like see whether or not, with your ears, with the metronome, and then seeing the grid, you should be able to tweak it slightly to get it perfectly matched up with the grid and on tempo.
Yeah, that's actually pretty much what I was going to say with the timing part, because it sounds like you might have tried matching up the vocal to the beginning of the beat, which is a mistake a lot of people make, because there's not a lot of drum or percussion there for you to even listen to, how to match it up. So you might be doing a lot of guessing there. So you would definitely want to go turn on your metronome or go to a part of the beat where the drums are actually playing and match up the vocal there. If you match it up there, it'll match up forever. It'll match up throughout the entire beat.
Yeah.
Unless you're messing around with some weird beat that's changing up its timing. But for the most part, it should match up.
Yeah,
if I'm up in the chorus.
If I'm working with an acapella, like the first thing that I'll do is I'll make sure that that the acapella is in tempo and in time with like whatever project I'm working on, and then from there I'll sort of build the beat around the acapella. And then if I feel like I need to change the tempo, then I can just stretch everything like the acapella like automatically stretch it with the tempo of everything else, and that way everything's going to stay in time, you know, throughout the whole project. So I feel like that answers his question pretty well. It looks like Fat Hedonist found a re-upload of the Carnage video. Should we watch this now, or should we let people? I guess we'll let people watch that on their own time. I'm gonna watch that after this though, because it always makes me smile. Poor Carnage. a lot of people were like speculating that he like doesn't actually produce, and he just like has a ghost producer because of that interview. But
I think he definitely produces.
yeah, I think he does too.
Definitely does. Yeah, he's actually he's doing pretty good. At least before the whole COVID thing or whatever, but he was still performing live at festivals and whatnot. Like he was still pretty big on the festival stage, like the he would go do a lot of EDM shows. So
Yeah.
he was doing all right.
Yeah.
You know, I was gonna say Seamless actually spoke up for him after all that happened. He was like, hey guys, you know, everyone has their way of doing things. Just because he doesn't know the names of certain things doesn't mean. I'm like, all right, dude, I get
Just
that you
because he
wanna
doesn't know what a volume knob
play
does.
nice,
doesn't-
but come on, man. You can't be like promoting for Razer and
Yeah.
FL Studio at the same time
yeah.
and not even understand the volume knob.
Yeah, no, the volume knob is one thing. It's like anything else you can kind of let it slide, but that one, I feel like everyone needs to know what a volume knob is. But anyway, yeah, no, it's all good, man.
Yeah,
I'm not trying to hate on Carnage. Like,
Definitely not.
you know, obviously he's
definitely
doing
not. It was
something
just
right.
a
He's
good
he's
laugh.
making more money than I am doing music. So
Exactly.
can't hate on him. All right, so Lost in Static, what's up? Thanks for joining. What's your question? I'm having a hard time breaking down what's going on in the first 18 seconds. I would like to. Okay, so let's take a listen to this and see what it sounds like. Okay. So
Right, three effects.
okay, what are you hearing?
Guys, before you go on, just so you know, we can't hear any of those samples you're playing.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
you're able to play them too. These are inside of the submit questions area. So
Don't-
whenever we click play, you're able to click play as well.
Yeah, so just so everyone knows, they should be like when I do the replay, you should be able to hear them. But yeah, because I don't have my audio turned on in Discord, so sorry for the people who are live in the chat. I guess you can't hear that, but yeah, if you want to listen to it on your end, go for it. I mean, it's a pretty short little intro. What are you hearing, Ian? That you were gonna say?
Filtering, a low pass filter,
Yep.
and halftime, and then they're also using a reverse effect.
So I was unsure about the reverse effect because I thought that at first, and there also it sounds like there's some reverb going on there too, because but I'm on the fence about the reverse effect. Definitely a low pass filter, and then it sounds like there's some other weird effect going on where it's like I think instead of a reverse effect, going back to the Destructor plugin, they have this like amp, like built-in amp feature on there, and to me it sounds like there's one of those presets thrown on it, so like some sort of effect like that where it's giving it's sort of like a weird like spatial, like it's some sort of weird spatial effect that's going
I actually
on.
thought you were going to say granulizer or something like Portal.
I'm not
If you're
actually familiar with
output
Portal. I'm not familiar with Portal.
Okay, it's kind of like a granulizer effect, but it can create space at the same time. So that might be the reverb that we're hearing and the reversing and the weird filtering all
Definitely-
at once.
definitely
So it
could
could
be
actually
that.
be
Yeah.
one effect.
It could be, yeah,
if,
that's true.
they're using Portal.
So yeah, you
Is
can
Portal a plugin?
Yeah, it's made by Output. They're the same guys that make what are the Output plugins, David? I can't remember off the top of my head right now.
I don't know.
They make the Arcade.
arcade. So is that the vocal plugin?
Yeah. Or
Okay,
the
yeah.
sample. Oh, Exhale. Arcade, Exhale, Signal. But they usually make plugins that work inside of Contact. And that's what I believe like Arcade or not Arcade, but Exhale is for sure, I think. I could be wrong. I'm not as familiar with Output as some of the other companies, but they do have a plugin called Portal that is a granulizer effect and a spatial effect all in one. There really isn't any other effect plugin like it right now. So yeah, Output is actually doing a lot of stuff that a lot of people aren't doing right now. So something to look into for
So
sure.
it very well could be that, but yeah. But so what I'm hearing is definitely filtering, some sort of reverb and some sort of weird spatial effect, which is giving it this sort of reverby weird sound. So yeah, you could definitely emulate that with the plugins that we just talked about.
Good question, because there is definitely a whole lot going on in that intro, even though it's super chill. But yeah, for someone that's starting out, yeah, I can understand why you would have no idea what all that is.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Cool.
No problem.
Anyone else in here have any questions? Luke, I see you're back. We actually just answered your question while you were gone, so you're probably gonna have to come back and rewatch the replay. Tak, do you got any questions? Or okay, no.
Nope.
Fat Hedonist, you got any other questions? Okay. All right. Well, if everyone's good, I guess we can go ahead and wrap things up here. Ian, thanks for co-hosting with me. It was
For sure.
a good Q&A. We got through a lot of questions. So yeah, I guess I'll see you guys next week. I'm definitely, now that I'm back in the new place, I'm wanting to pick back up with the weekly Q&As and hopefully weekly live streams and everything. So I'll be hopefully more active in the server, and we'll be. Oh, and the other thing, I'm definitely going to be listening to everyone who submitted the tracks into the producer challenge that we did. So keep an eye out for that too, and I'll be announcing the winners of that soon. Alrighty. Well, I'll see you guys.
All right. Take care.
All right. Peace.